When I was hired to catalog the personal archives of an old Soviet historian named Antonov, I didn't expect to find much more than dust and bureaucracy. The man had been an eccentric recluse, known for hoarding documents on obscure Cold War-era mysteries. The DYATLOV Pass incident was one of his obsessions, and I had always been fascinated by the case. So I accepted the job without hesitation. Most of the collection was what I expected. Yellowed reports, grainy black and white photos, and weathered notebooks filled with indecipherable Cyrillic scrawl. But then I found it. It was tucked away in a locked wooden box, hidden behind a false panel in Antonov's study. The key was still in the lock, as if he'd been interrupted mid-task. Inside was a reel-to-reel tape, an old Soviet recorder, and a single handwritten note in English. For the brave or the damned, you'll be both before it's over. I should have stopped there, but curiosity sank its claws into me. The tape hissed to life, the whir of its rotation filling the silence. A man's voice spoke, shaky, strained, but distinct.
My name is Ivanov. I was part of the search team sent to the Dyatlov group in 1959. This is my testimony. One I've kept secret for decades, because no one should know what we found.
I leaned closer, chills crawling down my spine. The voice continued.
When we found the first bodies, we thought it was the cold or an avalanche. The missing eyes, the crushed skulls, those could be explained. But when we found the tent...
His voice broke, and there was a long pause.
They weren't running from the cold. They were running from something inside the tent. Something that tore it open from within.
The room seemed to grow colder as the tape played on. Ivanov described their descent into the forest, the discovery of more bodies, and the gnawing sense that something was watching them.
We heard it before we saw it. A low guttural growl, like metal grinding against stone. At first, we thought it was the wind, but then the trees began to shake.
The tape crackled, and I heard faint sounds in the background. Muffled voices, crunching snow, and something else. A deep, resonant hum that made the hairs on my neck stand on end.
It came for us at night.
Ivanov whispered.
A shape, tall and twisted, its limbs too long, its eyes glowing faintly in the dark. It moved like smoke, like shadow, but it wasn't either. We fired our rifles, but the bullets passed through it like water. One by one, it took my comrades. Not quickly, but slowly. It wanted us to see.
There was a sound on the tape then. A scream. Raw and primal. It didn't sound human.
I ran.
Ivanov admitted, his voice trembling.
I left them behind. When I turned back, it was standing over the last man, its face inches from his. And then it looked at me.
That was the last thing Ivanov said before the tape clicked off. the reel spinning idly in its housing. The silence that followed wasn't comforting. It was oppressive, like the air had thickened. My hands trembled as I removed the reel, staring at the now empty wooden box. I didn't want to open the safe again. Every instinct screamed at me to burn the tape, the box, everything, and pretend I'd never heard his voice. But I couldn't stop myself. The false panel slid aside with a groan, and my heart sank. There was something else in the hidden compartment. A second reel-to-reel tape, wrapped in an old cloth. It was heavier. The metal spool almost rusted. The label smeared but legible. Evidence. Final expedition. Against all better judgment, I placed the tape on the recorder and hit play. At first, there was nothing but static. Then, faintly, I heard footsteps crunching through snow and hushed voices speaking in Russian. It wasn't Ivanov's voice this time. It sounded younger, less certain.
Ivanov says it's still here.
One of the men said.
That it doesn't stay in one place. It follows.
A second voice responded, calmer but grim.
We should turn back. Burn what we've found and report nothing. Report nothing?
The first voice snapped.
What about the truth? The truth is dead.
The second man replied. The tape hissed, and the sound of the wind grew louder. Then, a low hum began to rise in the background, deep and resonant, like the growl of an animal far too large to exist.
Do you hear that?
One of the voices whispered.
Shut up.
The other one hissed. The footsteps stopped. There was a long stretch of silence, broken only by the hum, which grew louder with every second. I turned up the volume, leaning closer, when a third sound joined in. A voice. Not human. Nothing human could sound like that. It was a deep, wet gurgling, punctuated by sharp clicks, like teeth snapping together.
It's here.
One of the men on the tape whispered. The recorder hissed again, and then all hell broke loose. Footsteps pounded against the snow, men shouting in terror. I heard something heavy crashing through the trees, followed by a wet, sickening crunch that sent bile rising in my throat.
Ivanov!
Someone screamed.
Don't look at it. Don't look.
The tape cut to static, and for a moment, I thought it was over. But then the hum returned, clearer this time, like it was coming from inside the room. I froze, my ears straining. I knew it was impossible, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the sound wasn't just a recording anymore. It was here. The tape hissed, and a single voice came through. Quiet, but unmistakable. Ivanov's voice.
You should have stopped.
The recorder clicked off, and the room fell silent. My breathing was shallow, every nerve in my body screaming to run, but I couldn't move. Slowly, I looked back at the safe. The box was empty. But the hum didn't stop. It was louder now, vibrating through the walls, through me. And then I saw it. It wasn't a shadow. It wasn't anything I could have imagined. At first, I thought it was a man. Tall, gaunt, and standing unnaturally still near the far wall. But as my eyes adjusted, I realized how wrong I was. Its flesh was pale and translucent, stretched too tight over bones that seemed to jut out at impossible angles. The skin pulsed faintly, as though something underneath it was writhing. Its face, or what passed for one, was the worst. It had no eyes, just two hollow, gaping pits that seemed to drink in the light. Its mouth was too wide, filled with jagged teeth that jutted out at odd angles, and it twitched in small, unnatural spasms, as if it were trying to form words. Then it moved. Not in any way a human, or even an animal, should. Its long fingers brushing the walls as it crouched low, its head tilting sharply to one side. I could hear the faint sound of wet clicking, like joints grinding together, and that same low hum that had haunted the tapes filled the room again, but this time it was inside me. It opened its mouth, and from deep within, I heard a chorus of sounds, screams, voices, and something like laughter, all layered on top of each other. My legs locked. My brain screamed at me to move, to run, but I couldn't. The thing took a step closer, its feet barely making a sound on the wooden floor. It reached out, its fingers impossibly long, the nails cracked and blackened, and for a moment, I thought it was going to touch me. Instead, it stopped. Its eyeless gaze fixed on the recorder. The hum grew louder, vibrating through the walls. My skull. The thing tilted its head again, as if listening to something only it could hear. Then, it spoke. A single word. I don't know what it said. My brain couldn't process the sound. It wasn't a language, not one that belonged to humans. It was raw, primal, and filled with a weight that made my vision blur and my chest tighten. The recorder exploded, sparks flying as the reels melted into blackened, twisted metal. The hum stopped instantly, leaving a silence so thick it pressed against my ears. The creature turned back to me. Its mouth twitched, curling upward in a grotesque mockery of a smile. And then it did the impossible. It stepped into the wall, its body folding and stretching, becoming one with the cracked plaster until it was gone. I didn't run. I didn't scream. I just stood there, staring at the ruined recorder, my mind trying to comprehend what I had just seen. Eventually, I stumbled out of the house and into the cold night air, my breath visible in the icy fog. But as I looked back at Antonov's study, I saw it. Not the creature, but something worse. The walls of the house were pulsing faintly, like they were breathing. And from somewhere deep inside, I heard it again. The hum. It's not a shadow. It's not a man. It's something older. Something that doesn't belong in this world. And now, I know why Antonov hid those tapes. Because once you hear the hum, it doesn't let you go. I left Antonov's house that night and never went back. But it didn't matter. The hum stayed with me. I hear it when I wake up, faint and distant, like it's just outside the walls. I hear it in the silence between breaths, in the stillness of the night, and I see things now. Small things at first, shadows flickering in places they shouldn't, reflections in mirrors that don't match my movements. Last night, I swear I saw my own face blink at me after I'd already turned away. But the worst part is, I'm starting to understand the hum. It's not just noise. It's something alive. And it's whispering to me. It's telling me to go back. To find it.